عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله عنه يبلغ عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said in the hadith that the prayer is not valid for the one who does not recite Al-Fatiha, which is Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening of the book. And la salah means that the salah cannot be correct. And here the word salah refers to either the entire prayer, as if he did not recite Al-Fatiha in any of the rak'at in the salah, according to the three madhahib that is known, or the rak'ah itself is not valid. So if a person does not recite Al-Fatiha in one rak'ah, then this rak'ah would not count for him. And this hadith, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب, this hadith is also referring to a person who's praying by himself. Not that if you are led by an imam. That's a different ruling. So when the hadith says la salah, meaning that salah is not valid unless you recite Surah Al-Fatiha, whether it's in the salah that is read loud in the rak'at, or the salah that is read silent, both. So you have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. If you don't, then this rak'ah does not count. Now if you are led by an imam, most of the opinions that the imam's recitation is also your recitation. So if the imam were to give you time to recite, then you can recite Al-Fatiha. But if you don't recite Al-Fatiha, the imam's recitation, inshallah, is sufficient for you and for him. And the other hadith in the virtue of Surah Al-Fatiha, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. Before we move on, inshallah, the ruling of Surah Al-Fatiha in recitation, just because we spoke about it. So we already said if the person would recite Surah Al-Fatiha, would not recite Surah Al-Fatiha in a rak'ah, this rak'ah would not count. So for example, if he read in Maghrib, the first rak'ah he read Al-Fatiha, the second rak'ah he read Al-Fatiha, the third rak'ah he did not recite Al-Fatiha, or in Dhuhr or in Asr, then all he has to do is redo this rak'ah by itself, or add on this rak'ah as to cancel that rak'ah that he did not recite. Now, if the person is led by an imam, we have different opinions, and whatever you follow, inshallah, it will be correct. The first opinion, that the recitation of the imam is sufficient for the recitation of the ma'mum, even in the loud and the silent, both. Okay, that's one opinion. The second opinion, no. Second opinion says that if the imam recites loud, then it's sufficient for you and him. But his silent recitation, it is not sufficient for you. So for example, if you're led by an imam in Salatul Maghrib, and he recites the first rak'ah with Al-Fatiha, then this is good for both of you. If he recites the second rak'ah, this is good for both of you. Now the third rak'ah, he is silent, he's reading silent, then you must read Surah Al-Fatiha for yourself, because that rak'ah is yours now to read. So that's the second opinion. So the first opinion says all his recitation is your recitation. So if he's reading Dhuhr and you don't recite anything in Dhuhr, his recitation is your recitation. Now the second opinion, based on this, Dhuhr will be what? Invalid for you, because you have to recite every rak'ah on your own, because he is silent. Now the third opinion, if the imam gives you time, if the imam recites, then you could recite with him Surah Al-Fatiha, even in the loud, which is not recommended by many. So when he says Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you also say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, you say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Taban silently, so you don't disturb the other people who are next to you, and you don't disturb the imam. As the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was reciting and the Sahabi recited after him, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من قرأ معي, who was reading with me? فقال أنا يا رسول الله, he said, I was reciting with you. فقال إنما شغلتني عن الصلاة, then you distracted me from my prayers, صلى الله عليه وسلم. While you were reading, you distracted me, you confused me in my prayer. And that's why a lot of people, when you start reading a surah that they know, they read it with you, like سبح اسم ربك الأعلى in witr, or قل يا أيها الكافرون. They start reading. That's not recommended. We're not talking about the surah. But Al-Fatiha, they say no, it is recommended because the Prophet ﷺ said, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. His prayer is not valid if you don't recite. So if the Imam recite, you do recite with him. Now the other opinion says, to make it easy, as Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah ta'ala said, if the Imam recites, then you stay silent. And when the Imam is silent, then you recite. This is an easy opinion now. So if the Imam read Al-Fatiha in in Salatul Fajr, and he says, وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ آمين. Now, the sunnah is for the Imam to wait if it's obligatory prayer. If it's fard prayer, then the Imam waits to give you time to do what? To recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, if the Imam is silent and you know that your Imam will be silent, and they say you know that through what? The habit. You pray behind this Imam for a while, then you get into the habit of whether he is silent or not. So if the Imam is silent, then you should read Surah Al-Fatiha because he is giving you time to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. طيب, what if I recite Surah Al-Fatiha and my Imam started reading? Then you have the opinion of two. You finish Surah Al-Fatiha or you become silent when the Imam recites. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يقول وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Now, فإذا قرئ القرآن, if the Quran is recited. Now the ulama mentioned that this ayah mainly refers to the salah. فإذا قرئ القرآن, when the Quran is recited, فاستمعوا له, you should listen to the Quran. So if I'm reciting, I should cut my recitation and listen to the Imam's recitation. And the other opinion says if you have the time to finish it, then you could finish, inshallah, your recitation and then become silent with the Imam. So this is a summary of the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. Now the only thing left in Surah Al-Fatiha, just to mention now before we read the other hadith, inshallah, I'll delay to tomorrow so we don't keep you late, is that what if I come late and the Imam is already in his ruku'? I already missed Surah Al-Fatiha. So there is no way to make it up. There is no way to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Or if I come in and I say Allahu Akbar and he goes Allahu Akbar to the ruku', especially if the Imam did it on purpose. If he finds you coming running and then he says Allahu Akbar, he shouldn't do that. This is the fiqh of the Imam. This is another issue that anybody who leads Salah should have fiqh of Salah. يعني مثلا if we are in ruku' and you hear that someone is walking in, give him some time to catch the ruku'. Some people, subhanallah, you come in and you're making a sound and they go Sami Allah, like as if they're doing it on purpose, like just to make you miss the rak'ah. Or if someone comes in and you're in tashahhud, okay, and this is your last tashahhud and the Imam is doing tashahhud, and I hear that someone is walking in. Well, if he came in and he sat down and he says Allahu Akbar and he said, he catch the congregation, the jama'ah. So let him get the reward of the jama'ah. You could just go for a few minutes, even silent, or make dua, or till he catches the salah. So you could give him the reward of catching an obligate congregation jama'ah in the salah. So now if I come in and the imam finishes al-Fatiha, what should I do? Should I stand up and recite al-Fatiha and then make ruku'? No, you shouldn't do that because his recitation for sure is sufficient for you in this case. Why? Because you already did not witness that recitation. So his recitation would count whether it's silent salah, whether it's loud salah. Then now you could say Allahu Akbar and make your ruku'. So, but I didn't read Al-Fatiha in that rak'ah. Yes, because you missed that pillar of standing, which you're not obligated to except to the minimum of Takbiratul Ihram in this case. And therefore your salah, inshallah, will be valid. You don't have to wait till you recite Al-Fatiha. Because by the time you do that, he will be done with his ruku'. Now you miss two pillars in a row. It makes your salah completely invalid. Allah Ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد جزاكم الله خيرا والحمد لله